All right, you sick fucks. Welcome back to the show.
Today we are diving headfirst into a dumpster fire of epic proportion.
The worst films ever made.
We're talking about the kind of cinematic abortions that make you question why you even bother with this whole watching movies thing.
I mean, seriously.
You're gonna dissect these celluloid turds
Figure out what makes them so goddamn awful.
and explore how some of these movies manage to claw their way to legendary shit status.
It's gonna be beautiful.
We've got a stack of sources here, reviews, articles, lists upon lists of cinematic abominations.
Think of this as your crash course in how to avoid wasting precious hours of your life on movies that should have been aborted before they even hit the screen.
And trust me,
We're not talking about your run-of-the-mill boring flicks.
they're talking about movies so bad they make The Room look like Citizen Kane.
So let's kick things off with a blast from the past,
We're going back to the good old days.
when special effects were basically just cardboard cutouts and cocaine was considered a breakfast beverage.
We'll start with a couple of vintage atrocities that'll make you appreciate how far, or maybe how little, filmmaking has come.
Okay, I like it.
First up, Reefer Madness from 1936.
Oh yeah, Reefer Madness.
This anti-marijuana propaganda piece is a masterpiece of unintentional comedy.
Where smoking a single joint turns you into a murderous piano-playing maniac. Talk about fear-mongering bullshit.
It's fascinating how this film reflects the social anxieties of its time.
Yeah.
The portrayal of marijuana use is so over the top, it's almost surreal.
Right.
But back then, people were genuinely terrified of the devil's weed.
It's also a prime example of how bad filmmaking can accidentally become entertaining. The acting is wooden, the dialogue is clunky, and the special effects are laughable. It's the kind of movie you watch with a group of friends and just make fun of the whole time.
But beyond the unintentional humor, Reefer Madness offers a glimpse into how media can be used to manipulate public perception and reinforce existing prejudices, and that's something that's still relevant today, even if the target of the fear-mongering has changed.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Speaking of movies that are unintentionally hilarious, how about The Terror of Tiny Town from 1938? It's a Western with an all-dwarf cast.
The Terror of Tiny Town is a bit of a head-scratcher,
It's undeniably exploitative.
but it also reflects a different era's approach to representing people with dwarfism.
Yeah, and it's just batshit crazy to watch. I mean, a town full of tiny cowboys riding even tinier horses, it's like something out of a fever dream.
This film definitely pushes the boundaries of taste,
For sure.
but it also raises some interesting questions about how we portray difference on screen. It's a reminder that what might have been considered acceptable entertainment in the past can be deeply problematic today.
Now let's talk about a movie that's so bad it's become a cultural touchstone.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about the holy grail of shitty cinema, the Citizen Kane of crap, Plan 9 from outer space.
Ah, yes, Edward's masterpiece of incompetence. Plan 9 is practically a textbook example of how not to make a movie. The acting is atrocious. The special effects look like they were made by a kindergartner, and the plot makes absolutely no goddamn sense.
But here's the thing, Plan 9 is so bad it's actually good.
It's the so bad it's good phenomenon in action.
Right.
The film has become a cult classic celebrated for its sheer awfulness.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You can't look away even though you know you should.
And part of the appeal is Ed Wood's earnestness.
Yeah, I can see that.
He genuinely believed he was making a great film, and that sincerity shines through even amidst the chaos.
But for every Plan 9, there's a Zat.
Oh God, Zat.
A film so irredeemably awful, it makes you want to gouge your eyes out with a rusty spoon. This 1971 flick is about a Nazi scientist who turns himself into a mutated catfish. Yes, you heard that right.
Zat is a test of endurance. It's not funny, it's not scary, it's just painful.
It's like watching paint dry if the paint was made of pond scum and smelled like week old fish.
Yeah.
And trust me, that's not a compliment.
It's a good example of how not all bad movies achieve cult status.
Yeah.
Some are just plain bad, devoid of any redeeming qualities.
And then you have the big budget Hollywood flops, the movies that were supposed to be blockbusters but ended up as box office poison. Movies like Heaven's Gate, the 1980 Western that nearly bankrupted United Artists.
Heaven's Gate is a cautionary tale about directorial hubris and the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael Cimino, the director, had complete creative control.
Right.
And he ran wild with it, blowing through the budget and alienating the studio.
The result?
A bloated, self-indulgent mess that clocked in at nearly 4 hours long. Critics savaged it, audiences stayed away in droves, and United Artists was left holding the bag.
Ouch.
Heaven's Gate became synonymous with box office disaster. It's a reminder that even with a talented cast and crew, a film can go spectacularly wrong if the director loses sight of the story.
And speaking of box office disasters, let's not forget about Ishtar, the 1987 comedy starring Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman, two Hollywood heavyweights, a $55 million budget, and a script about two talentless lounge singers who accidentally become embroiled in a Middle Eastern revolution. What could possibly go wrong?
Ishtar is a fascinating case study in how a film can become a victim of its own hype. The production was plagued with problems from the start, and the negative press surrounding the film created a sense of doom before it even hit theaters.
And let's be real, the movie itself just isn't that funny. It's trying to be a wacky, irreverent comedy, but it falls flat on its face.
Ishtar became a punchline, a symbol of Hollywood excess and creative misfires.
All right, so we've talked about vintage crap and big budget bombs.
So far, so good.
But what about the world of animation? Surely cartoons are immune to the blight of bad filmmaking, right?
Wrong.
Wrong.
Oh, animation is just as susceptible to cinematic failure as any other genre. And perhaps no film exemplifies this better than Super Mario Bros., the 1993 live-action adaptation that traumatized a generation of gamers.
Super Mario Bros. Is a cinematic abomination. It takes a beloved video game franchise and turns it into a dystopian nightmare. The plot is incoherent, the special effects are atrocious, and the casting is just baffling.
Bob Hoskins, who played Mario, later admitted that it was the worst film he ever made.
Really?
He even said that he and John Leguizamo, who played Luigi, would drink whiskey on set just to get through the filming.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then there's Food Fight, the 2012 animated film that spent nearly a decade in development hell before finally being unleashed upon the world. This movie is something else.
Food Fight is a visual assault.
Jesus.
The animation is jarring and unsettling. The character designs are creepy, and the plot is just plain bizarre. It's like someone took all the worst aspects of advertising and product placement and crammed them into a 90-minute fever dream.
This movie features supermarket mascots fighting each other in a battle for brand supremacy. It's like they took the most cynical aspects of consumerism and turned them into a children's film.
Food Fight is a testament to the fact that even in the world of animation, bad ideas can sometimes make it all the way to the big screen.
And with that, we've officially entered the 21st century, the era of CGI shaky cam and found footage horror. And you know that means?
Even more opportunities for filmmakers to fuck things up royally.
Buckle up, folks. We're about to delve into the modern era of cinematic abominations.
Oh.
And trust me, things are about to get really, really ugly.
Let's start with a film that has become a legend in the world of bad movies.
Oh, yeah.
The Room.
Oh, The Room.
Tommy Wiseau's 2003 masterpiece of cinematic ineptitude.
It's like a car crash in slow motion.
Yeah.
Except the car is made of bad acting, nonsensical dialogue,
Oh, yeah.
and plot holes you could drive a truck through.
Huge.
And yet it's become this massive cult phenomenon.
I know.
People flock to midnight screenings. They quote lines. They threw spoons at the screen.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on here?
It's truly bizarre.
It's so strange.
I think The Room is a prime example of the so bad it's good phenomenon taken to the extreme.
Right.
It's so incompetently made,
Oh my God.
so bizarre and nonsensical that it transcends its own badness and becomes something else entirely.
But what is something else? Why do people love this movie so much? Is it just ironic enjoyment? Are we all just laughing at it? Or is there something more going on?
I think there are a few factors at play here.
Right.
First, there's the sheer entertainment value of watching something so spectacularly bad,
Yeah.
like a train wreck you can't look away from.
Yeah.
Second, there's the communal aspect. Watching The Room with a crowd is a shared experience, a chance to bond over the film's awfulness.
I could see that.
And third, I think there's a certain level of admiration for Tommy Wiseau's unwavering commitment to his vision,
Yeah.
no matter how misguided that vision may be.
Yeah, you got to give Wiseau credit for that. He poured his heart and soul into this movie, even if the end result is a cinematic dumpster fire.
And that sincerity, that passion is part of what makes The Room so endearing, even in its awfulness.
All right, let's move on to another modern-day classic of cinematic crap, Birdemic.
Yeah.
Shock and Terror from 2010. This movie is about killer birds attacking a small town, but the real terror is the filmmaking itself.
Birdemic takes bad filmmaking to a whole new level.
Jesus.
The special effects are atrocious, the acting is wooden, the dialogue is clunky, and the pacing is glacial.
Oh, God.
It's like the director took a filmmaking 101 class and then immediately decided to do the exact opposite of everything he learned.
The birds in this movie look like they were animated in Microsoft Paint.
Oh,
They
yeah.
just sort of glide across the screen, occasionally exploding for no apparent reason.
For no reason at all.
And the sound design.
Don't even get me started.
Just like someone recorded a bunch of pigeons fighting over a bagel and then just slapped it onto the soundtrack.
It's truly awful.
But here's the thing. Despite all of its flaws, Birdemic is strangely compelling.
I know, it's so weird.
It's so earnest in its awfulness, so committed to its own bizarre vision that it becomes almost hypnotic. You can't look away even though you know you should.
You just can't.
It's like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car's made of bird shit and bad CGI.
And that brings us to Cats, the 2019 adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical. This film had everything going for it. A star-studded cast,
A massive budget.
a beloved source material, and yet it managed to become one of the most universally reviled movies of all time.
Cats is a visual nightmare.
Oh, it's so bad.
The CGI is terrifying, the character designs are unsettling, and the whole thing just feels off. It's like someone took a bunch of furry costumes, slapped them on some actors, and then filmed the whole thing through a Vaseline-smeared lens.
The film's visual aesthetic is certainly jarring.
It's fucked up.
But the problems go deeper than that.
Yeah.
The story is incoherent, the pacing is uneven, and the performances are all over the place. It's like the filmmakers were so focused on the technical aspects of the CGI that they forgot to actually make a movie.
And the music. I mean, I love the Cats soundtrack.
Me too.
But in the movie, it just feels wrong.
I know.
The arrangements are weird, the vocals are overproduced, and the whole thing just lacks the energy and theatricality of this stage production.
It's like they took everything good about the musical and just sucked the life out of it.
Cats is a perfect example of how, even with the best intentions and the most advanced technology, a film can go horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of style over substance,
For sure.
and a reminder that sometimes less is more.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've talked about some of the biggest cinematic disasters of the 21st century.
It's been a wild ride.
But what about those movies that are just plain bad?
Yeah.
Without being so bad they're good. The movies that are just boring, uninspired, and forgettable. Do those movies even matter in the grand scheme of things?
That's an interesting question. I think those movies are just as important as the spectacular failures.
Really?
They represent the mediocrity that pervades so much of modern filmmaking. They're the films that we watch and then immediately forget,
Right.
the films that leave no lasting impression.
And maybe that's the real tragedy of bad filmmaking. Not the movies that make us laugh or cringe,
All right.
but the movies that make us feel absolutely nothing at all.
Exactly. Those are the films that truly deserve to be forgotten.
So we've spent the last hour or so just shitting all over some of the worst movies ever made. But you know what's been bugging me?
What's that?
Does all this bad movie talk actually matter?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's fun to laugh at these cinematic train wrecks,
Sure.
but is there anything we can actually learn from these colossal fuck-ups?
I think the answer is a resounding fuck yes.
Okay.
Bad movies are more than just entertainment. There are valuable lessons in what not to do. They're like those cautionary tales your grandma used to tell you, except instead of warning you about the dangers of talking to strangers, they're warning you about the dangers of green screens, nonsensical plots, and letting Tommy Wiseau anywhere near a film set.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an aspiring filmmaker, watching Plan 9 from outer space is probably a better learning experience than going to film school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bad movies can teach you about the importance of good writing, competent directing, and a basic understanding of how cameras work. They can show you the pitfalls of overambition, the dangers of unchecked egos, and the importance of having a clear vision for your project.
So in a way, bad movies are like those crash test dummies they use in car safety tests.
Yeah.
They take the hits so that we don't have to.
That's a great analogy. And just like those crash test dummies, bad movies can help us understand the limits of what's possible, both technically and creatively. They show us what happens when you push the boundaries of taste, logic, and basic filmmaking competence too far.
And sometimes those boundaries need to be pushed. I mean, some of the most groundbreaking films of all time were considered controversial or even offensive in their time. So maybe bad movies are just a necessary part of the creative process. They're the failed experiments that pave the way for future masterpieces.
That's a really interesting point, and it brings up another important aspect of bad movies. Their ability to challenge our preconceived notions about what cinema can be. Sometimes a movie is so bad, so unconventional, so utterly batshit crazy that it forces us to reevaluate our own ideas about art and entertainment.
Like The Room.
Exactly.
That movie is so far outside the realm of traditional filmmaking that it practically exists in its own dimension.
I know.
And yet it's become this cultural phenomenon, this beloved cult classic that people adore for its sheer absurdity.
The Room is a perfect example of how a bad movie can transcend its own badness and become something truly unique and unforgettable. It's a film that defies categorization, a film that challenges our expectations, a film that reminds us that sometimes the most memorable experiences come from the most unexpected places.
So what's the takeaway here? Should we all be watching more bad movies?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I do think it's important to approach bad movies with an open mind and a sense of humor. Don't be afraid to laugh at them, to dissect them, to learn from their mistakes. And who knows, you might even find yourself enjoying the ride.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the cesspool of cinema. We've laughed, we've cringed, we've questioned the very nature of reality, and hopefully we've all learned a little something along the way.
Remember, folks, bad movies are more than just bad movies. They're cultural artifacts, they're cautionary tales, they're opportunities for laughter and learning. So the next time you find yourself watching a cinematic train wreck, embrace the absurdity, appreciate the incompetence, and remember, it could always be worse.
That's it for this deep dive, you beautiful bastards. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and for the love of all that is holy, avoid watching food fight at all costs.